Hey, sports fans and savages. Welcome to the Greg Medford Show. I'm your host, Greg. We're out here in Phoenix, Arizona. We're going to talk some politics. We're going to talk education. We're going to talk saving our country today. I've been on a big bent as I got kind of approached pretty hard to run for governor. And a lot of you out there in Greg land have heard about this a little bit. And I kind of stiff-armed everybody away because I was like, you know what? I do not need the clown show of running for statewide office. But as this has happened, as it's unwound, as it's unfolded, and as I've met all of these people during this process, I have some policies that I want to run to the State House with. And I'm actually in the middle of this white paper I'm doing for a piece of legislation I want to push into Arizona. And I'm sitting down at my favorite little watering hole a couple weeks ago, and I'm having my favorite old-fashioned with some, what was the whiskey? What was the bourbon that was in that? Oh, I can't remember. It wasn't Four Roses. Anyways, I was having this fantastic, couple of great-looking bartenders make these great old fashions, and I'm like, it's a great place for me to unplug for like a half an hour while my kid's doing math tutoring. And I'm sitting here talking to this fella next to me, and he says, oh, my wife's into this, that, and the other. And then next thing you know, his wife comes in, and we start talking. And so as we go on this journey, doing this citizen soldier reporting, which is really what's had to happen as the mainstream media has abdicated their responsibility. The third leg of the milk stool has collapsed. You know, the population gives up a little bit of its God-given inalienable rights to a ruling class so that we can kind of all get along. And the third leg of the milk stool is the critique of the reporting class, which is why when the Bill of Rights came together, the right to free speech and assembly and free press was not the Eighth Amendment, it was the first. Because it was critical, it was pivotal. It was pivotal to the forming of the Republic. And nobody would ratify the Constitution and sign the contract to join the club without that item. And it's been abdicated. And so how does the Republic function if the ruling class has co-opted the group who's supposed to speak truth to power and reflect the mirror back on society? They're not doing their job. So they are a bunch of derelict scumbag leftist Marxist commie fucks, and we are stuck left holding the bag. And so this is what we have to do. We have to get on here and risk my company. We have to risk my business. We have to risk, and everybody else does the same thing. Who's doing this format. And it's a great opportunity to jump in and have longer, more mature conversations about real issues that affect us. I've broken everything in this country down into two categories that we're dealing with. We've got our battles and we've got our war. And the war is being lost while we're fighting battles because we've forgotten that our ideas are better and we've lacked the courage to inculcate them in the young people. So that we're stuck undoing 15 years of bullshit. By the time they start voting, we've got 15 years of crazy horse shit to undo. And we have to find a way to get back to the original school charter, which was making good citizens who are civically aware of how our country works. So as I'm sitting there talking to this fella, he says his wife's all obsessed with this and into it. She pops up, we start talking, and we're like two retards in an airport. Like, hey, I'm crazy too. And so we have them in as a guest today. They were supposed to be in last week. I had strep throat and I was down for the count for a few days. So today, Kim Martinez and her friend Steve Smith. Guys, thanks for coming in. Your organization, I should have my glasses on. It's the American Federation for Children. And every time I go to say this, it wants to roll off my mouth, the American Federation of Teachers, because that's their big organization, right? So you guys have made a cheeky play in contretemps to the unions and the teachers, because why is it all about the teachers and not about the kids, right?
Right. We have all of these teachers unions. There are no unions to represent the kids. Mm-hmm. So that's us.
Right.
So a lot of us call us lobbyists for kindergartners.
Okay. Well, let me, I'm going to put my glasses on here. So thanks for coming in today, you guys. Sorry about the false start last time. So tell me a little bit about this organization. Who founded this organization? Who started it?
Well, we have a board of directors that started it. They have really steered us throughout this journey. And of course, like many people have heard, the big name is Betsy DeVos. And she has an incredible history where her mom was a school teacher and her dad was working class, owned a hardware store. So their family became very interested in education. And Betsy, who, by the way, contrary to what many people have heard, is one of the kindest people you will ever meet. Do you agree with that?
Amen.
Yes, very generous. She truly believes in this cause. So she helped kick off this organization.
All right. And how did you guys get involved with it here in Arizona? Did you kick it off nationwide? Is it 50 states? There's organizations in all 50 states at varying levels of progress, kind of coordinating with each other or communicating, or what?
We're heavily active in almost half, but we have a presence nationwide. Kim was actually in Arizona before with AFC, as we call it. Before I got here, I served in the state legislature for 8 years. So when I got out, sounds like a prison sentence. When I got out, then I joined up with the team about 3 years ago, and so we had the Arizona efforts, and nationally we have a great team, great leaders nationally to push us. And when you see wins like Youngkin in Virginia, when you see DeSantis, he'll even credit, both of them will credit, it's the school choice families that put them over the edge. Mm-hmm. So we know that this is the issue every year, but it's especially the issue this year when you see the abject failure of our school system, especially during COVID, where these kids are so far behind schedule. Now more than ever, we all advocate for school choice, because I don't care what the school or learning system is. If a kid is behind or just wants to propel further, they should have every option available to them to do it. And that's exactly what we promote.
And there's a common misconception that if you're pro-school choice, you've probably heard this, Greg, that you're anti-public school. And that is 100% not it. What it is if you're pro-school choice, if you're truly about helping families and children, you want those families to go to whatever school their child needs.
I'm pro-success and I'm anti-failure.
Yes.
I try to explain this to people all the time. I'm like, it is never about an ideology. It is always about performance. If it's an ideology, you're just an ideologue, and that doesn't stand for much. I'm really big on like performance, meritocracy, what actually works.
So we might have to steal that for one of our taglines in our messaging, because that is perfectly stated.
It is. And what actually works is what the parents want, right? I mean, last time I checked, it's no difference when you find a doctor, when you find a restaurant, when you find somebody to work in your house or a contractor. You will do the research. You know what you want. You know what your unique child needs, okay? And much like during the whole healthcare debate, one doctor does not work for you, me, and everybody else. Everybody has different needs. Everybody else has different ambitions, right? And so who knows better what the needs of their child is? Me? You? The governor? A mayor? Or the parent? Well, obviously, we believe it's the parent, not the unions, not anybody else, a parent. And moms and dads should be able to have the full-fledged ability to say, you know what, my kid, Johnny over here, needs something like this. Sally over here needs something like this. And they should be able to go get it.
I think where the conversation a lot of times gets, it's just like if you have the abortion debate and you're talking to a pro-choice person or a pro-abortion person, they take the discussion to some crazy extreme. So when you start talking about parents having a say in their education, educators and union members have a tendency, leftists have a tendency to say, well, what does the average parent know about mathematics? What does they want to get very granular very quickly. And I go, whoa. We're not talking about what the curriculum should be in math class. We're saying if they're at a shitty school in the Washington School District number 13, and they want to shift to a school that's performing really well, we've got, the problem is what you guys are talking about, everything comes back to accountability. Mm-hmm. What you're talking about ultimately is a shift and the freedom to shift. And the freedom to shift is it's a nudge towards accountability is all it is. It's making successful schools, it's rewarding like, hey, we want to be with you. And unsuccessful, no, we don't want to be with you. That little push in the marketplace, that's the cornerstone of the American experiment.
Right.
It's the nudge of, It's the nudge of of rewarding success, you know?
Yeah. And we've heard every argument that you can get from the other side, the union bosses, because we're not anti-public school system, but we are very anti-union bosses. Their argument is, well, the public school system has all kinds of accountability. When you have a failing school, what does it matter what the accountability is there? They're still not meeting it, but
Right.
we continue to throw money at that. And so to your point about parents, and Steve's point, you're exactly right. We're not saying this is how you teach math, but we are saying, if you're a parent, I can tell my kid's not learning math. And
Right.
so I need to get them a math tutor. I need
Right.
to get them into a school where they can process what they need to learn. The unions just feel like they have this death grip because they do,
They do.
on taxpayer funds. And instead of freeing those children, save one child at a time, they continue to just have this death grip, and they paint it as it's what's best for all.
So let me cage this a little bit, because a lot of people watching this, when we do these deep dives, we're used to glossing over these core things that we're talking about because we know them and it's kind of in our wheelhouse, but it's never really explained when you hear it in the 30 and 60-second sound bites on the news, or even if Fox News does a 3-minute piece on it. You don't get to do the deep dive on what the real philosophical issue at hand is, right? So when we talk about the teachers' unions, and a lot of people don't understand this, every teacher in the country, and you guys are in this world, and so I'm a little bit of an interloper. If I've got this off, you guys step in and square me away. So every teacher in the country, and there are millions of them at this point, right? How many teachers do we have in the United States?
Well over 2 million. What's it at now?
It's a large block of people. And in voting world, it's a gold mine. And in cash world, it's a gold mine too. So for everybody who's watching, the reason this is such a hot button issue, and the reason why school choice is such a big deal, and why school unions have such a grip on the testicles of this country, really on the heart and soul of the country, the reason why is because every teacher in every public school in the United States is forced into a public sector union at that point. And then every pay period, a bit of their pay is taken and given to their local union. So far, I'm totally on target here, right?
Yep.
So all of those millions and millions several million teachers, and those millions of dollars each week or each pay period go into a fund, and that fund is for the National Federation of Teachers, or the National Teachers Union, or National Teachers Association, or whatever it is. It's all into a national teachers group, their union, whether it's broken down by state or by county or national, it's all interconnected. They don't give money to Republicans at all, ever. And I think I've seen a study that 98% of all funding from the National Teachers Associations all goes to Democrats.
Yep.
So what you have is a mandatory funding channel for the Democratic Party here in the United States through the public school system, and it's millions and millions and millions of dollars. And then what they do is they've set up a fiefdom through the Department of Education in Washington, D.C. They've set up a fiefdom there where they lean on everything that happens and push. They have their thumb on the scale for everything that can be pro-kids that might go against the union or the funding. And so you got to follow the money. So when you hear us talk about charter schools and school choice, they don't like us because we say, hey, I pay my taxes in my neighborhood. And let's say in my neighborhood in North Phoenix, my allocation's $3,400 a year for my property or whatever. If I choose to leave the public school system and go to a charter school in Arizona, some fraction of that money, maybe $2,500 or something, goes with my child to their charter school. Some of that money still is retained for the public school, some percentage, I believe.
Right.
It's not dollar to dollar.
Right.
So this whole argument is about funding. The public schools don't want to let go of the government's cash grab on your property because we're going to make great schools and help your property values. And the battle is going on because they are taking our money and they're failing at their responsibility, or they have an agenda that's propagandizing our kids, and then we have no power. And the money goes to elect people. It's a negative feedback loop who continue to reaffirm and resupport this. So For everybody out there in Watchland, whether you're a knife dude or a gun dude, you've got a woman, you've got kids, or your brother and sister have got kids, or you had kids, or you're thinking of having kids. I don't care if you're a gunslinger or a knife guy or a Republican or a Democrat, or you're some person watching just because you hate me. This affects everybody. It's the core of our country because they get the kids from the very beginning. They get our money in a mandatory fashion, and they're spending it, and a good portion of it is going towards their political aims. There's nothing in the world for Republicans, the right side of the spectrum, that does this automatic public funding. It's unbelievable.
It is. And you explained it perfectly. One of the things, the other element to that besides just our tax dollars is, so teachers, right? They're notoriously underpaid. Their salaries never seem to go up. We get all of this money getting filtered into the public school system, going up and up and up per pupil spending. The teachers never seem to get that money. They're still paying for school supplies out of their pocket. They still don't, there's a lot of people that don't want to teach because they're just not able to make enough of a living at it. So if all this money is going into the system, why isn't it making it to the classrooms? So the public school union bosses, what they want is to grow the system. They want more and more hires because then they take that $1,200 a year from more people, and their money to spend on politics goes up, up, up.
Right. It's money, power, and politics.
Yeah, and I've told everybody for years, it's what you said earlier, follow the money. It's very transparent what's happening because, for example, there's a program in Arizona called the Empowerment Scholarship Account Program. They're called ESAs. They're basically scholarships for kids to go to different schools or get different learning if they want homeschool or online or hire tutors. The problem is all the people that oppose it, some of the ones that you mentioned, a lot of these unions, a lot of these other folks out here, the Save Our Schools and all these groups out here that oppose this stuff, they oppose it because every kid that walks into a public school has a dollar sign on their head.
Right.
They got a backpack full of money from state, federal, and local dollars. And that's about $11,500 a kid in Arizona. We add up all that money. So every kid that walks into any school walks in with a backpack of $11,500 per year.
Yep.
If a kid leaves,
That
the money goes with
walks
them. So that's why groups like Save Our Schools and the Federation for Teachers, you don't hear anything about Save Our Students, Save Our Kids. And we support, students over systems is kind of the mantra at AFC. And so when I say follow the money, it's that. And that will trickle down to your union dues and everything else. But the larger context is, and this is where it's so jacked up, because if they're like, whoa, you can't have these kids leave our school. We've got them. We've got the monopoly on them. We got them in our grip. So they don't care, seemingly, that the kid is going to get a better education. They want the monopoly. Don't take our kids. These are our kids, and we've got to keep them. Why? Not because they're getting the A plus, world class education. It's because their money will go with them.
So what we have, for everybody sitting in watching this go on, we have this country that's based on the free marketplace of competing ideas, right? And we all get to bring our ideas to the table and get them voted on. We get to have the best people hopefully come to the forefront and make their pitch, and we vote on them. We believe in all this stuff with our core. And most people, when you ask them and you separate them from a microphone or separate them from their party and politics, when you ask them blindly questions, people have a tendency to poll very conservative, and they poll on the side of justice and equality. And I don't mean like social justice. Fairness and equality for the treatment of people.
Right.
All of us, left or right, we have a tendency to all poll kind of right of center. In the public school system, what we have is a group of people that we've put into a system, and we've extracted them from the competition. There's no more competition. When there's no competition, there's malaise in everything. Think about athletes with no competition. Think about ideas with no competition. Think about somebody telling you their opinions and nobody ever questions them. They turn into bullshit artists. It's what's happened in the public schools because there's no competition. If there's no competition for performance always goes down. Always.
Or there's no fair competition. Because if you look at it this way, yes, there's charter schools, and yes, there's private school, and yes, there's home group. So one could argue, well, no, there is. But when you look at the money ain't the same. Charter kids do not get the same, even though they're public schools, do not get the same as quote unquote government K-12 schools.
Even though they're outperforming.
Yeah. And private schools don't get any of that money. But what we try to advocate for, especially through programs like this ESA program and others, is saying, whoa. There's no such thing as government money. Last time I checked, it's our money. It's called taxpayer money.
Yeah.
So why can't the taxpayer, who's actually putting the money in the system, have a say where that money goes? So now if you have equal competition, I, as the mom or dad, hold the dollars in my hand. You, union boss, don't have them. You, government school, don't. I am now the ultimate consumer. I now can spend my money at the private school, at the charter school, at the online school, at the tutoring place. I have full authority and power over my money.
So when folks are watching in on this and they hear this conversation going back and forth, it could sound like a bunch of kind of technical governmentese, but really when we hear the discussion nationally, all you'll hear is school choice. Mm-hmm. When you hear the phrase school choice, there are people for and against it. And we're a group of people who is pro-school choice. And what that means is we want to be able to flex to where the best education is for our kids. That's it. And I imagine what's gone on is there's been a negotiation for, let's say my annual tax is $5,500 on my property, and let's say my public school contribution would be $3,600, but I get $2,500 to go to my charter school. They've decided that the facility that's in your neighborhood is going to get the facility apportionment of that taxes to keep up that facility because it's part of the land and part of the neighborhood. That seems like it's kind of the breakdown. Is that what's happened?
Well,
Because
the state of Arizona,
we want dollar to dollar.
Yeah,
you guys would like to have dollar to dollar, but we don't have dollar to dollar right now, right?
Yeah, the state of Arizona funds charter schools directly through the state. So charter schools are not privy to overrides, millages, what we call them back east, and all that kind of stuff. So they are not privy to the property tax dollars or the override dollars that your city or Phoenix or anybody might do. So when you see, hey, vote yes on override 1, 2, 3 for more, charters aren't getting that. They're getting funded solely through the state. And that's why you have that disparity. That's why you'll have public government schools get this much and charters down here get this much. Yet if you took every charter school in Arizona, there's about 550 of them, and put them and made them their own 51st state, the state of charter schools, they'd be tied for number one in the nation in outcomes and academic outcomes. So clearly we know that charter schools are working, but what we know even more than charter schools are working is we know that parental choice is working. So whether you call it school choice or educational freedom or whatever it is, moms and dads are going to make the best decision 9 times out of 10 for their kid. Why? Because they have the most invested and at stake with their child and not the local or national, federal, state government.
You know, the thing is, too, and people like to get very, like I say, whenever you talk with educators and union people, they like to get really granular about this and come with real specific examples. The truth is, as we see at the presidential leadership from the last cycle, and we see it with good leaders, great leaders, you don't need every little bit of information to make good choices. And as parents, you're the leader of your little posse, right? You don't need all the information to pick the best school. You really don't. And your gut tells you a whole lot really, really quickly as a parent who's been currently in the middle of this and having gone through this for many years now. It seems like everybody wants to get very intellectual and they want to parse it down and get really granular. You don't have to get granular. Allow choice and it will work itself out because that's the truth. We've seen that for 250 years now.
Yeah, and it's interesting when you brought up abortion earlier, it's seemingly the folks that want the most choice, if a kid lives or die, won't give you choice on where that kid can go to school. You know, it's funny when we advocate for things and what we advocate for, and that's why we keep it simple. It's just we are agnostic. I don't care if you go to that school, that one, or that one. I don't care. Just
want it to be your choice.
I want it to be your choice. And so here's what we find out from a lot of folks with, if you go to private schools, some of the private schools have 98% graduation rates and all that. But we find a lot of parents don't walk up to a private school and say, tell me your graduation rate and I'll decide if I go here.
Right.
They're going to say, what is my kid going to learn? What options do you have here that's going to make them, to your point, a better, well-prepared citizen for life?
You know, what's funny is I have a lot of friends whose kids go to private school. I'm one of the few people in my circle whose kids go to public school. And none of them did that. They all just picked the most expensive one that was reasonably convenient and just went for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I have it.
But that's their choice.
I know.
Amen.
and
Let them
and
pick it.
And well, the thing is, I'm that way with other stuff too. I'm like, the guy says, well, you can get this one or this one. I'm like, which one's the most expensive? I'll take that one. I see why people do it, because when you start parsing it out, it's information overload. And you're like, God, how the hell do I know what's going on in these 5-8 different classes between this school and that school, and they're all saying they're A+ rated, blah 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 blah. I'm just gonna pick the expensive.
Yeah. But the thing is, every parent is paying twice.
Oh,
You're
yeah.
paying in your property taxes
Right.
that you've talked about earlier, and
Right.
every other tax that we pay all goes in the education bucket, at least a piece of it. And then you're reaching back into your pocket and pulling out more money to pay for that tutor, that private school,
Right.
and Reagan even said this 30, 40 years ago. He says, wait a minute, why are we paying twice? Your government is taking our money to educate our kids, but I have zero say where that goes. And if I disagree with where it goes, I've got to reach right back in my pocket again and pay for the one that I want.
And they make this argument. They'll say, well, that's because the value of your home is tied to your school district and it's tied to the performance of the schools. And just because you've got enough money to go to Brophy or some other private school, it doesn't mean you should be pulling the rug out from under the neighborhood that you're benefiting from the schools by being in. That's the way they kind of come back. And if everyone did that, well, then how would the infrastructure of the public school in your wealthy neighborhood hold up for the kids whose parents can't afford private school? And then guys like me go, well, let the school fail then.
Exactly.
It's okay.
Last time I checked, we were in a free market economy.
And they're like, well, that's children, though. That's not a business. And I would go, board up the windows and the doors, and a good charter school principal and business model will show up and teach those kids next week.
Absolutely. And we especially want to bring light to in the lower income neighborhoods where those schools are perennially failing. Those schools never get any better. And those parents are far from having money to go put their kid in a private school. And sometimes it's hard to get them to a charter school. Well, that's what the whole point of school choice is. That the Empowerment Scholarship Account program that Steve mentioned, that is meant to help these disadvantaged kids get the money to go to a private school and get out of those failing schools. And to your point, if those schools fail, the other side says, well, the school's bad, it's already bad. It's never going to get better unless we put more money into it. And if these kids leave, it's been failing for 20, 30 years. Yeah. At what point do we call it?
I've learned some axioms looking at public policy and in business, and more money is almost never the answer. It's the first thing everybody wants when you're out of ideas. When you have no good ideas, you think more money is the solution, and it's never the solution. Have somebody in your personal life whose life is collapsing, and they just think some money is going to help them. It'll never. As soon as the money's zipped through, they're going to be back in the exact same problem again. There's no fixing broken institutions with more money. That's the crazy.
And the best example you can give them on that is per pupil funding.
Oh, I know. I was just going to just segue right into, if you look at charter schools are the best educational yield in the country. And so it's not about teacher pay.
But if you flip it, what are the areas of the country that has the highest per pupil funding? Washington, D.C. at over, $20-some thousand bucks a kid.
Gotta be New York and California also, right?
D.C., New York, Chicago.
Where the unions are strongest.
That's right. And you get more per pupil funding in those cities than it costs to go to most colleges.
Right.
And if you look at their results.
And they're failing now, too.
Those are oftentimes the worst academically performing schools. So look no further. So yes, you have an argument on both sides. If you want to take the charter route or even the private school route, half the private schools in Arizona, more than half of the private schools in Arizona are at or far below this ESA award amount that kids would get, which is still even half of what the other kids get. But when you look at, DC, Detroit, Chicago, New York schools, whose per pupil funding is through the roof, yet their outcomes are down here, clearly it ain't about money.
The metrics over 100 years now are absolutely clear that money is almost irrelevant with outcome.
Yep.
It's almost irrelevant because good teachers are a calling.
Yep.
And so, yes, it's hard to say to 2 million people in this country, hey, look, you're not going to make as much money as engineers. Hey, you chose this. It's not a high-paying career. It's a high-rewarding career where you get to shape and mold youth, and it's part of your nurturing nature, and good for you, and thank you for doing it, and it's a service. You don't make a lot of money as a priest either. You don't make, you're not going to get rich being a nurse either. those nurturing things that we need in society, they don't pay the same, and they shouldn't, unless you live in Karl Marx land. And last I saw, that's failing, and they're in a war right now, and they're failing also. So I call bullshit to all of it. Free choice. I say every single dollar you pay that's allocated for your taxes for your kids, every bit of it should be mobile, and it would break the stronghold they have. California, they never vote for school choice. They're completely against it, and they used to be a really good example of the public school system 40 years ago. They were leading the nation. So was New York. So was Illinois. So was Massachusetts. No longer the case.
Right. So we have a real breakdown of innovation for sure in the public school system. And, so much of this came to light. And the reason why this is probably even interesting to you now is because I know you've been following it, but to share with your viewers and listeners is because COVID was like throwing a big, just wrench in the whole.
I love it.
Yes, right?
I love
because
it.
parents have woken up. And then the reaction to that has been really interesting, right? So some of the teachers that are especially woke, and especially off to one end that you probably would not, most reasonable, normal parents would not want this person in their class, have decided to take to social media and throw up all these crazy videos, just exposing this. I'm a teacher and I'm in charge of a classroom of kids, and just you see the comments are always the same. This person should not be in a classroom. Can't believe, that they're still there. The district better fire them. And then we also saw all the stuff going on, all the hoopla at the school boards meetings when parents tried to go figure out what's been going on. And it's just that parents were so trusting for so long, especially if their kid was in a decent to good public school. They just trusted. They have lots of stuff on their plate. So I'm going to send my kid to school. I moved to this neighborhood because it's a good neighborhood and the schools do well. So I'm going to trust that they're okay at school. And then now we're seeing that even in some of those schools, you have some pretty loopy teachers and stuff going on.
This indoctrination thing that's going on, I know you guys aren't on the critical race theory, and that's a whole nother can of worms. You guys are on money going with the kid.
Yes.
All of that's been pulled back and exposed. And so to see, my kids go to a great school system and are in a good schools, and the stuff that's coming home, the stuff that came, I'm already really hypersensitive to all this, and I'm like, oh no, that's not what happened, because in 1536 this is what happened, and then you have this treaty, and my daughter's like, oh my god, what's wrong with my dad? She has this teacher at school she really admires, who's a goddamn leftist. I mean, she's educated and she's got all the dates memorized and she knows all the stuff, and she's really energetic, and she's a good teacher, and she's a freaking Marxist. So my daughter's coming home because she's conservative, and she's going, Dad, how is she coming to these conclusions? And I said, well, here's why she's coming to these conclusions, and we talk about it. Everybody's gotten involved, and everybody's been having these conversations because it's the unintended consequences of shutting the world down to stick it up Donald Trump's ass. It's come back like a boomerang to hit him in the back of the head. I think it's hysterical because most of us, our faith is way down and our engagement is way up, and that's the best thing that could possibly happen.
And another thing that happened that really exposed everything that had been happening for years and years and years, decades, is that in order to get the schools back open, Randy Weingarten from AFT wanted welfare for all and all of these issues that have nothing to do with teaching kids.
Right.
But we are not going to open the schools until we get this whole agenda.
They were blackmailing us. The dirty, rotten commie. She's a dirty, rotten commie.
Well, over
for those of you who don't know,
dollars came to Arizona just from all those federal dollars alone. I mean, they're sitting on piles of money. They can't even. Yeah.
It's not even real money. It's just stolen and printed. And everybody wonders why our houses are too expensive for our kids to move or to buy. So Randy Weingarten, for those of you who don't know, she's the head of the National Teachers Union. Is that about right?
Yep.
And she's awful. So for those of you, we hear you throwing these names around like they're people we know down the street. She's a Washington person. She resides out of Washington, right? Or is she and I think she might be a California person. I can't remember now. But she's head of the National Teachers Union. Yeah.
Yep.
And was a big part of the masks continuing, was a big part of the school shutdowns. She's the one who gave shade to everybody to keep masks shutdowns going in perpetuity. And then what was just being mentioned was she was angling these big leftist grabs as a blackmail of us to try and undo the masking and open schools back up. Was
Exactly.
that about,
Yeah, that's exactly what happened. Yeah, so she definitely is not fighting for your children.
No.
Yeah, so
Yeah, fighting for the system.
she's protecting her monopoly.
That's what it is, and and you talked just a second ago about parental involvement. When your daughter comes home, you say, "Oh, well, hold on." And I think what school choice does a lot, it forces the parents to be more involved. So there's a lot of teachers in my family, and any teacher will tell you, gosh, if only I could have parents more involved at home, right? To help them with their homework, to show up to school, to know what's going on. If I just had more parental involvement, your kid would do exponentially better. And so when you have school choice and now parents are looking for a school, they're involved in that decision. Should we drive a little further to go to that one because that one might be better for you, Johnny? Should we do this? Well, parents are now automatically invested a bit more than they were. And as Kim said before, a lot of parents just trust, well, that's the closest one, go to it and good luck. But the second you start involving parents more, so now they're involved in which school I'm going to. Well, what if they're based in the school they want to go to based on what the curriculum the school is teaching or the values the school is teaching?
Right.
Well, now the parent is automatically even more involved. And the more you get that relationship going with school, kid, mom or dad, everybody's going to be the better for it.
Yeah, it all comes back to the nudge of accountability. The nudge of accountability. It's all it is. A tiny bit of knowledge because you don't need it all, and a nudge of accountability. And I think it's I almost want to just write a whole thesis on America lacking accountability. Everything in our country works if there's accountability, and everything in our country fails without accountability.
So true.
Our government works with accountability. Imagine if everybody who was insider trading in Washington was not allowed to insider trade because there was accountability. How would bills change? They'd spend less time dicking around naming highways after lesbian, transgender Native Americans from Washington State. They'd spend less time fucking around with that, and they'd spend more time working on education. They'd spend more time working on our military, more time, getting Ukraine's missiles they need.
And it's also, who is the arbiter of accountability? In many cases, I don't want my government or government body telling me what I should look for, what suffices as accountable. When I'm talking education, in many areas, that's needed. But in education, so we'll get people that argue with us today. Well, wait a minute. Do private schools and home schools and kids that use tutors, is there accountability there? Are they taking a certain norm reference test? Are they taking the AZ merit? And are those results posted? And can we see and be accountable for what they're teaching? To which I would say, the parent is the one who should decide the level of accountability. If I believe that my school is doing great for my kid and they are on the right path, I don't care. It's almost like those, in restaurants, those health safety letters, especially in California, we're an A rated or we're a B, and they'll put like the health safety code in the window. Some people will eat just because of that code. And if that's who you are, God bless you. Oh, even though that's my favorite restaurant, they're B, I only go to A because I want cleanly food or whatever it is. Whereas so many people would say, how many of those in Arizona have those? None. So I'm going to go to the restaurant that I want. Why? Because I'm accountable for what goes in my body. I either like the way the food tastes, I like the service, I like the location, I like whatever it is. And whether there's a mandatory A-rated cleanliness graded, listen, I'm going to be accountable. And that's how I think a lot of education is.
People confuse accountability in the marketplace with performance. And those are two different things. So if you want to know how a school's performing, see how their graduating class does. Those numbers, most schools, it's hard to lie about that.
And how many kids are going to college.
Yeah. You can see what their graduation rate is. You can see what their college attendance rate is, college acceptance rate, or how many kids are even, applying to college, right? They've got a lot of data on that. That's not the accountability any of us are talking about. We're talking about the ultimate accountability. We ain't going here. We're leaving because it's free. When your money is stuck and you're stuck, that's the most anti-American thing there is. You know, that's the thing to get back when people, they want to get granular to upend your freedom thing and say, no, it's not about how they're doing in English. I'm concerned with about that, but I'm judging the whole thing from what's best for my kid. You know, I've got one kid who you could throw her in a cave with a metal cage on the front and a pile of books. She's going to come out. She's going to know everything in the books, and she's squared away. I got another one who's super creative, and he needs a different kind of role than my daughter does. And I'm trying to, I don't have the answer for him yet. I'm trying to find it. And the thing is really the only people who have those choices now are the upper class.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because we
It's
got
the haves and have-nots.
we got the money to fly.
Yeah.
You'd think anybody who's concerned about the folks that have-nots, this is the most pro-have-not argument there is. Because there aren't failing schools in North Central Paradise Valley. There's failing schools in Maryvale, Glendale, Peoria, Alhambra, you know, down that way. Those failing schools, those folks they don't have the upper class mobility.
Right. So, and just to kind of give you an example of how fierce this fight can be, Steve and I, a couple years ago, worked to free, 8 families on the Navajo reservation from having to get kicked back into schools that were rated DNF forever. We had to help fight everybody from the superintendent, you know, the legislature, all of it, to free 8 families to be able to stay in a private school because the superintendent wanted to kick them out of that after she discovered a state line issue. Does that even make sense? Those families are in a situation where their kids are learning. You know, the results in the reservation might be some of the absolute worst in the entire state. They were at the bottom of the matrix when we were fighting this, and it hasn't gotten much better. But
And that's part of Arizona's low performance nationally school-wise is we have a huge reservation population that is all blended into that number. Is that accurate or not accurate?
yeah, and the high schoolers from the reservation, we've heard this from countless people, and the data backs it up, will graduate without being able to read at a level to fill out a job application. So there's already limited opportunity on the reservations. Are these kids teenagers? They're not going to college. Are they moving off the reservation into the city, not able to fill out a job application where their families are not? What are they going to do?
This is the cornerstone of the Western civilization. This is the argument. You know, I was thinking about running for governor. I'm like, you know, that's kind of an ego project. I don't need that. This is what needs to be changed. It's the most important thing.
It is.
If this gets done right, the military works out right, government works out right, law works out right, everything works out right because we have a knowledgeable citizenry.
Well, I always quote the great Whitney Houston. I believe the children are our future, right? and that's what I always hear from every side. Well, the children, do it for the children. What it takes a village to raise a child. If only we could help one child. Blah, blah, blah. That's all you hear. Well, I'm sorry. The most formative part outside of their home is their education.
Yeah.
So if you truly want to raise up a good child, give them every tool they need to succeed. And the last thing I'll kind of say about this whole competition thing and all this, it's very similar to the healthcare debate years ago with Obamacare, which is there's a one size fits all for healthcare. There's your provider. There's your doctor. We'll cover the bill. You just be grateful and go and do it. And what we found, that doesn't work.
Well, you remember the before the Cultural Revolution, the Chinese all wore that Chairman Mao top. It was that very same one with the frog, four frogs down the front and the collar. They all wore the same, men, women, everybody. That's government solutions. It's the one frock top for men and women, same fit. That's public school. It's what it is. It's this one mold, one way, unchanging, ka-chung, ka-chung, gray, uninteresting, uninspiring, no competition, monopoly.
Yeah, it's a one size fits all approach to which we say no. Just like in healthcare, just like in everything else in life, the more options you have, the better you can be. And all we talk about with school choices, this is like putting a Burger King next to a McDonald's. Okay. If there was a government restaurant that they said, hey, we built these great restaurants, we took all your tax money, that's the only place you can go and eat. How long do you think people would be happy with that? They said, well, wait a minute. Some people might say, oh, that's great. I got a free meal every day. Good. I know where to go. But others would say, well, wait a minute. What, you mean I can't go there? It's my money. I can't decide where I go to eat.
Yeah, no, it's crazy.
Yeah, no, you
There-
need to eat
There's
here.
no other part of society that would go like this
No.
that anybody
Oh, right.
would agree to.
No.
Yeah.
Except we're agreeing to kids doing this.
Right.
Now,
Our
so-
most valuable asset that people would argue. Yes.
Yeah, in many ways, yeah. So let me ask you, Steve, what is are you working some legislation through right now? You spent 10 years as a state senator here in Arizona, right?
Yeah. We're doing a huge push on the school choice stuff, namely one of the ZSA bills as well, which is just saying, hey, we either want all kids or at least every low income kid who's needy to have a shot at these scholarships. And the only thing that means is 90% of the money they would have got if they stayed in their government school goes to mom and dad, who now can purchase and buy the education that they see.
And just so everybody listening knows, that we're not talking about their communities writing a check to the parents. We're talking about the communities saying, hey, look, if your property taxes pay $2,600 allocated towards your child's education, then 90% of that money is mobile. If you find this Alhambra Great Heart Academy down the street and you want to take your kid there, your 90% of that $2,800 can go with you.
Yeah, except in our case, it's 90% of what the state portion of education is for K-12. So remember, you have state,
so
local,
that's
and
not your
federal.
municipal. So you have a municipal that goes with the kid that's mobile already in Arizona, right?
When the municipal stays municipal, this program goes after the state dollars.
okay.
So you have state, federal, local, and the average amount, if you were to get an ESA for your kid, is somewhere between $6,500 and $7,000 a year. And it's a formula, which is why it's not an exact science. But each parent who says, you know what, I want control of my kid's
Okay, hold on. Let me
education.
back up so everybody else gets this too. So I choose to pull my kids from public school and go to charter school, which is a public school of sorts here in Arizona. For a lot of people don't have charter schools in their part of the country that are listening, right? So when I make that choice to go there, I fill out some form at the school and they send it in, and then the state government says, oh, the state allocation for Greg's 2 kids now don't go to their school in their neighborhood. It goes to this academy they're going to.
So charter
Is that accurate or not?
Kind of.
Ish.
Yeah. Well, so charter schools are publicly funded, so there is no tuition for that. So the ESA program actually helps open up every other option outside of public schools and charter schools. So it opens up private schools. If you wanted to homeschool your son, for example, and just bring tutors in, we've had parents do that. So they will set up their own schoolroom in their house, have a reading tutor come in. Some of our special needs parents, physical therapist will come in, and they're using that $7,000. Well, they actually get funded higher because their child has special needs, but they'll use that money that they're getting to pay for a true customized education.
So if I wanted to pull my kids out and get them to Brophy, I don't know what the fee is for Brophy. Do you guys know what it is right now?
Well,
Ish?
unfortunately, I don't think you'd qualify, Greg.
Yeah,
for an
yeah.
ESA.
I mean, Brophy's, what, 15-ish, maybe even more, 15, 18 grand a year.
Yeah.
And that's why I said about half the private schools in Arizona are at or less than that $7,000-ish amount that the ESA gives you. So the real world working example is this. I go to XYZ government school. I don't want to go there anymore for whatever the reason is.
Right.
Whatever the reason is, I would prefer to go to that Catholic school, that Christian school, that micro school, that home school, that online learning academy. I can take 90% of the money that the state government was going to send me to go to that government school, which is about $65,000 to $7,000 a year, and I can take that money and go pay for tuition at the private school of your choice.
Can I do that or no?
Yeah.
Well,
if this bill
you have to-
passes,
and you have to be able to qualify. So there's these qualifiers that you have to meet, and that's what Steve is working on, which is why as you said, we were nerding out on this, I really wanted to get him in here because this is huge and it opens it up to so many more families. So the qualifiers before were if your kid is in a failing school, if they have special needs, if they're in foster care, there's this military families qualified because they have to move so much. So you had these really specific qualifiers that you couldn't join the program unless you met those. Now the bill that Steve's working on is going to open it up, and I'll let him take it from there because
you just open it up to either the whole state or to at least a huge percentage of it.
Right. You want to make it so if somebody like me says, hey, I don't like Cave Creek school systems for high school, I want them to go to Brophy. My state allocated funds for my kids would follow my kids.
Yeah, I think that's ultimately where everybody wants this program to go to. The bill that we're working on now is going to be one of two folds, either just for the low income families, the neediest of the neediest, and or for everybody. I mean, it's up to the legislature what they want to do, but clearly we would advocate for every kid having a choice.
Why just for poor people? Why do we only care about poor people?
Well, one of the reasons why this is especially important right now for the lower income, that portion at least passes, is because,
Is it because we can get away with? 'Cause it's for the poor?
No, it's because of COVID. So you have these families that are in South Phoenix. I cover stories on these families all the time, so I'm seeing it. So one of the stories we covered, there was a family, there were probably 12 people living in a 2-bedroom apartment, Hispanic family. The older generation didn't speak Spanish at all, the grandparents and all that.
Didn't
that were
speak
all
English
packed,
at all,
or,
you mean?
yes,
Yep.
English at all, yes. And so they're packed in this apartment. Well, you have a little girl there sitting with horrible Wi-Fi on a pretty crappy laptop trying to do her work, and she has nobody to help her. So we're talking about mass learning loss right now. That's one example of millions. Like it was somewhere around I believe 3 million, millions of kids that showed up missing when we went all virtual and when the schools refused to reopen.
Right.
So those kids have mass learning loss. So, you can argue that it should be open for everybody, but we at least need to do this because it's the right thing. So that portion needs to pass.
Yeah, and it's ultimately political. It's what the legislature can and will pass. But unfortunately, the legislature today, it's very, very partisan. So as it sits now today, 100% of Democrats have not supported these types of programs before. And unfortunately, not 100% of Republicans have supported these programs. And
we're in a split house, right? We have a one house majority, right?
We have a one vote majority in the House and the Senate. So if it is going to be a partisan issue, every Republican must vote for it.
Which Republicans are against it right now?
So there's 3 in particular in the House of Representatives that killed this initiative that we tried to do last year.
So who are these rhinos?
Well, the first one is Michelle Udall, and she is now running to try to be your state superintendent.
Right.
So, or charge of all of the education in Arizona. I don't think that's a good idea. And then you have 2 others, Joanne Osborne, it was in like the West Valley, and Joel John, who's a little bit more towards Yuma. Those 3 Republicans stopped, which would have been the largest school choice expansion in Arizona history last year, single-handedly.
How do we get rid of them?
Well, they all have primaries this year. And so, but what I love about America is the land of second chances. And so now this year, even though they voted against this bill last year,
they have a chance to not be scumbags.
They have a chance to rectify their vote.
I know. You're really nice. I'm not running for office now, so fuck them. Tell me their names again.
And they
real
have
quick.
a chance to make it right.
Tell me their names again.
You have Michelle Udall.
All right, hold on. Michelle Udall.
You have
where's she from? Do you know?
Like the Mesa area.
Mesa-ish. Boy, I'm gonna drop the hammer on her. Who's the other one?
Joanne Osborne.
Joanne Osborne. Where's she at? Do you know?
More of the West Valley area.
West Valley. I'm gonna get her too.
And then you have Joel John, who is also West Valley and part of Yuma. And those 3, if they, find the error of their ways and not only support their party, because over 90% of Republicans support school choice. President Trump, 2 weeks before the election years ago, said, in my second term, there will be school choice for all, right? It's very hard pressed to find a Republican who doesn't support this. Now, AFC, we're technically nonpartisan. We don't care who supports this.
Right.
We want everybody to support it. But when we did national polling, we do national polling and state polling with, according to the New York Times, which is by no means an arbiter of a conservative.
They're not exactly conservative.
They're not a right-leaning publication.
Right.
They've identified a certain pollster as the number 1 most accurate pollster in the country. Well, we commissioned a poll with them last year and this year. 75% of Arizonans support school choice.
Of course.
But do you know what's crazy? That means 68% of Democrats and 78% of minorities support school choice. So when you get either Republicans or Democrats, we say, I don't care what party you are. Could you all just listen to the people?
Well, that's the craziest part, because this is one of the common areas where we all agree.
We should. Now, here's the thing. The people agree.
That's
We
what I
the
mean.
people.
We agree.
We the people agree when
this
you
is
see polls
a
like
win,
this.
though. This is a win.
But do you know who doesn't agree?
The teachers union.
It's the elected, in Arizona's case, it's the elected Democrats.
Who get money from the teachers union.
And where do
who
they
are
get their
beholden
funding?
to the teachers union.
That's right. But
That's
their
right.
constituents, even in Democrat districts, their Democrat constituents, supermajority, support this effort. So now you have a disconnect between, well, wait a minute, are you truly representing your constituency or are you representing a different constituency? Because the people want it. So how about you do your job and give the people what they want?
Well, they like to brush this under the rug because this is the long game. This is the war. This is not the battle. It is the war. And the war is for who do we let infect our children's minds with bullshit or give them information to become free-thinking Americans. It's the war. Everything else in our culture is a sideshow bullshit hustle. Because we get this wrong, we can't even engage a good argument about birth control, death penalty, abortion, war, the draft, equality, civil rights. We can't even have real conversations if this is messed up. And it's messed up right now.
Well, and if you believe that the colleges have been indoctrinated for decades, what's the next progression? Well, they're going to kick it down to K-12. And if you can capture the minds young, and decades ago it was, well, let's go get the professors, let's capture the college minds. Those are the ones coming into the career.
Yeah.
Well, now it's, let's capture every kid.
Kindergartners.
And that's the big fight you see in Florida.
Oh, yeah.
That's a fight that we had in Arizona before. And all we're saying is, could you let kids be kids?
Yeah.
Could you just stay? Everything doesn't have to be political. Everything doesn't have to be force-fed, right? You see Planned Parenthood have contracts with some of our schools in Arizona. Why? Why does Planned Parenthood have a footprint in any school in this state? For what? They want to teach sex ed? Seriously? We just can't go back to when I grew up. Like, I went to public school my whole life. My kids go to public schools. I've got nothing wrong with public schools until they start trying to do more than what they're supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
Educate my kid. When they start to indoctrinate, that's when I have a problem, and that's when all people have a problem.
Yeah.
That's what you're seeing the fight about.
And if some parents are okay with Planned Parenthood having a contract in their child's school, that's one thing. But there are parents who are not. So that's where school choice comes into play, because regardless of which side of politics you're on, you need that freedom to put your kid into a school or an environment where they feel safe, where it's not going against what your values are at home that you're trying to teach your child, on and on.
It's like the filibuster, just because you happen to agree with it this year doesn't mean it's a good thing to put it on your side, because next year you're not going to be in charge and it's going to crush you. And that's the thing about when you let these camels put their nose under the tent. Next thing you know, they're standing in the tent and the whole place stinks. The problem is you say, okay, well, we want to have this in because it's good for disadvantaged females to have this access to this planning in their life and access to this stuff that wealthy girls have access to. Well, then do we do religious stuff next? No. Okay, well, the same argument, right? There's clearly benefits to all kinds of things. We don't want schools indoctrinating leftism, and we don't want actually them indoctrinating right either. We want them to say, like I learned from my teacher who went to Boston Public, he said, hey, this is how our government functions. Let's talk about 20 topics and let's look at both sides of the issue.
Whatever happened to reading, writing, arithmetic? How about just keep it simple? How about what's needed to be taught?
Well, for sure,
is taught
for sure. But
and accurate history.
Imagine civics and poli-sci in high school. Okay, it's definitely part of the curriculum. It has to be. We want kids to see how these civic debates have been going on for generations. It's important for people to see how the arguments go. It's not important. It's not valuable to indoctrinate them to one side of the argument. That's not valuable, and it's bad for our country. It's good for our country to say, all of these things are a debate between us, and here is what's being weighed out. Can you find a common theme so that you have an ethos or a worldview that you can go out and be a citizen and vote with some consistency? Because you talk about they're fine killing a baby. God forbid you change funding on a kid. God forbid you put a murderer to death. They're inconsistent on everything. There's no consistency to their worldview, and their worldview is infecting our public schools.
And the mantra I always kind of live by at the Capitol when I was there, and even in this position, and anything is err on the side of freedom. So if there would be a bill, a piece of legislation that comes up, well, I can see both sides. Is it going to restrict or hinder freedom? And is it going to somehow even encroach our constitutional freedoms? And that's the same thing we should do here. To your point, should they be taught this or this? Should they have a right-leaning curriculum or left-leaning curriculum? No, err on the side of freedom. Just teach what's supposed to be taught and let the kid use rational thinking, use their independent thinking, use their own minds. Don't force feed them, but you should always err on the side of just freedom and let the free market, in this case, let parents be the arbiters, let kids learn in a pushing kind of way. We're going to push this agenda or this Common Core stuff that was popular a few years ago. We're going to do it this way. Just get back to the basics. Sometimes it's so simple. And what I usually end up going to is the Bible, where the Apostle Paul says, "Don't let the simplicity of the cross be a stumbling block for you." In other words, Jesus dying for you is all you need to know. Don't overthink that. Don't overcomplicate that. Don't think you got to work your way to heaven.
So it's a KISS principle. Keep it simple.
Yes,
Yeah.
just keep it simple and let parents who know what's best for their kids do what's best.
Well, and I'm like this. Teach whatever you want. Just let me go.
Yes. Yes, that's my point. Yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
because what happens is we get into micromanaging everything, and you stop seeing really, there are new things that come along that we should talk about. Okay, you want to teach that? Let me go.
Exactly.
But you see that now in private schools. So you'll have Jewish day schools, you have Muslim schools, you have Catholic schools, you have Christian schools. Well, if I'm not one of those, I'm probably not going to go to one of those. But guess what? My gosh, that was my choice. I wasn't forced to go there.
Yeah.
But if I do want one of those, they should exist.
Yeah, I think iron fisting everybody into a single solution is never better than the potential shortcomings of the freedom for almost everyone else.
And that's what we saw in healthcare.
Yeah.
And what happened to that when we try to do that at a federal level?
It doubled the price of everything.
And not only did it double the price, it lowered the services. And that's when you had all these talks of death panels and everything else. It's like, it didn't work.
They went in and meddled with the healthcare system, and I got to tell you, nobody ever liked the price of it, but I always thought it was pretty good. It's awful now. It's the same people. It's awful now.
Right. And so they want to take that same government knows best top-down approach.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to do it there. Now we're going to do it here. And as we know, there's not one universal doctor for everybody. There's not one universal school for everybody. You've got to have different choices.
I always tell everybody, these government institutions, they always end up being the post office. They always end up being the passport office. They can't end up being anything else but that and the VA. Just stuff that doesn't work great, doesn't have good reputations, and you almost get sick to your stomach if you have to go there. Like, oh yeah, I gotta go down to the VA. Like, oh.
Well, and that was the debate that I had in the Senate at the time during all this healthcare debate, which is like, wait a minute. We have our veterans, and the VA was about 1% of the population for our vets that the government ran their healthcare for. And if there's ever been a healthcare model that should be the stellar, top of the line, gold-plated healthcare program,
It should be that.
it should be for the veterans.
And
And
boy,
what
it's-
did we find out the VA was? So we took the 1% healthcare that the government ran, that many will say they ran very poorly in the veterans, and we said, I think we can do that for 100% of the population. You know how ridiculous that is? You couldn't get it right for the one,
It's
but you're
asinine.
going to get it right for the 100.
It's asinine.
And that's why it failed.
Well, listen. So what's this bill that you're pushing through? Is there a number on it?
There is, but what I would encourage anybody listening is just call their state representatives and senators and just say, we support school choice. We support ESAs for all. And those ESAs are those scholarships, because there is a bill out there, Senate Bill 1657, but it could pop up over here. It could be part of a compromise over there. It could find its way over here. So rather than just saying, well, support X, Y, Z, we're saying, we support school choice. We support ESAs for our kids. And if you don't, we're going to vote you out.
Well, thanks for coming in, you guys. I appreciate you spending time. And I sorry about this second swing at it, but I think we got the bat squarely on the ball. Is there anything else you guys would like to throw out, or is there a website that you guys have people could go to if they want to read more about it?
Yeah, I would say if you're listening and you're like, well, wait a minute, I didn't even know scholarships existed. Wait, what are these ESA things called? What are these STOs called? What is all this stuff? You mean I can right now here today go to a different school if I wanted to? Your answer is yes, you can. All we are trying to do is make it eligible for even more people. But if you're out there listening, and if you're like, well, hey, how do I get that? We'll just give you a simple one. Text the letters ABC to the number 52886. So that's ABC to 52886, and that goes to us. And we have a whole team of education professionals here in Arizona that if you call and go like, well, dude, here's where I go. Here's my situation. Here's where I'd love to go. Are there scholarships right now in Arizona that let me do that? 9 times out of 10, we're going to, there are, again, we're just trying to make them even more for 10 out of 10.
So what's the number again?
Text the letters ABC to the number 52886.
And our education advocates will go over and even help like find schools that are
So they'll
somewhat
like reach back out to these folks.
Oh yes,
sure.
yes, yes.
And
And they can help find a charter school. They can help refer you to people that are homeschooling. You know, we have the micro schools that are happening now that parents are setting up inside their homes. So there's so many options out there. And even if the ESA isn't you're not going to qualify for it, there are like 10 other options that they can direct you to or help you find a good charter school.
And the neat thing is Arizona is considered like the top school choice state in the country.
Yeah.
Arizona, Florida are like 1A and 1B. And
Yeah,
so
we're gun rights and school choice.
number one is Second Amendment. Absolutely. And so I would say and again, all we're trying to do is make it even bigger, but we have a great program and programs in place now. So anybody who's just looking to get out, the Governor Ducey over the summer and earlier this year said, wait a minute, if your school is imposing a mandate, a vaccination mandate, a mask mandate, if you find out that your school closes down again, you can get this same scholarship too. And the governor's got these programs. So there's so many different things going on people just don't know about. So
Very cool.
Give us a call. We'll be happy to walk through it all with you.
Well, thanks for letting us know. So you guys out there, look, here's the deal. And a lot of you may not know how this works, but once you get elected, you put a staff together. And once you have a staff together, you have a certain amount of volunteers, and you might have some interns from local colleges who might come in and volunteer for your staff. You have people who answer the phones and people who answer emails. And what they'll have is a column or a spreadsheet running, and you could tell me if I'm wrong on this, and there's all these issues that any congressman or senator or any elected official is always kind of engaged with, and they've got their electorate calling in, emailing in, sending in letters. Some staffer or a young person is just sitting there basically looking for some keywords to say, oh, this one's about Second Amendment. Are they pro or anti? And they check off a little. There's a running tally all the time in almost every elected official's team of what their electorate is barking at them about. Is that about right?
Yes, and if you call like your state legislators, your state senators, all that, they'll have somebody their assistant who will answer the phone. And if you just say, hey, number one, I always say, ask for a meeting, whether it's a phone meeting in person. Last time I checked, we all work for you. You're our bosses. So
sometimes you can get a meeting for God's sake.
Of course you can. Or at least if nothing, you get a phone call. So when I was in the Senate, every person who ever requested a meeting I took. Whoever requested a phone call, I took. And it's because 9 times out of 10, they are the expert in that little area. So I'd have people that call up and say, hey, did you know that Access is screwing up these rates? And I'm like, well, no, I didn't know that because I don't have a special need kid who has those rates, but you would. So it's such a learning curve. So I would say call your legislators and tell them either just tell their office, whoever answers the phone, I support school choice. I want this. They better vote for it. Or B, hey, is Representative so-and-so there? If not, can you get me 2 minutes on a call with them sometime this week or next week, or when I come down there?
So if you got a little bit of baller in you and you feel like rolling up into someone's grill and having a conversation like this, like I do all the time, then go for it. If you don't, you're like, look, I just want to keep my head down, do my shit, but I want them to know what I think. You could send them a letter, send them an email, talk, and the buzzword, and we were talking about it when I opened up today, being kind of the in the 30-second soundbite, the phrase you're going to hear is school choice. If you say you're pro school choice, what it means is you are pro your money going with your student. You're pro being able to move away from failing schools. That's poor people and wealthy people. You are pro accountability. You are pro being able to let a principal or a failing school or a subpar school or a non-responsive school, or they don't meet your kid's needs because he doesn't learn the same way and you got to shift directions. You are pro letting your tax money go to where you as parent believe it should go and follow your kid. That's what pro-choice means. Not the other pro-choice, pro-school choice. So reach out email. It's super easy too, because it's, now it used to be you'd have to go in the yellow pages or the white pages and you go look in the government section or the blue section. Wasn't it a little blue section? And now you can just Google who's my congressman and you put in your zip code, who's my senator, boom, who's my U.S. congressman, U.S. senator. You got 4 people you can kind of chime in, and it actually makes a difference. And people have a tendency to think, oh, it doesn't matter, and it does. It really matters. One person can nudge the scale. So just get really involved. Appreciate you guys coming in. It's Greg Medford from the Greg Medford Show. I am out.